They thought they could buy me. They thought they could buy Africa. They were wrong. 3 weeks ago, Benjamin Netanyahu's government sent me a letter that changed everything, not just for Burkina Faso, but for this entire continent. I remember that evening clearly. The sun was sinking over Ouagadougou, the air thick with dust and anticipation. I was in my office reviewing security reports when my aide walked in, holding an envelope stamped, "Diplomatic Correspondence, Confidential." I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he handed it to me. I opened it, expecting routine diplomatic language, but as I read the words inside, my blood began to boil. Israel was offering Burkina Faso $1.2 billion. That's more than our national budget. But this wasn't aid, it was a bribe, a carefully packaged attempt to purchase silence, loyalty, and betrayal. They wanted me to stop criticizing their policies. They wanted me to convince other African leaders to soften their stance on Palestine. They wanted me to be their voice inside the African Union. And on top of it all, they wanted me to protect their business operations across Africa: mines, communications, energy deals, everything that kept their influence alive. For that, they promised a few more billions. They thought my integrity had a price tag. I read that letter 3 times. Each time the words felt heavier. They didn't understand who I am. I didn't lead a revolution to become another puppet. I didn't risk my life overthrowing corruption just to wear a cleaner uniform and obey new masters. I am a soldier. And soldiers don't negotiate with those trying to compromise their mission. My mission is the sovereignty of Africa, economic, political, and spiritual. When I took this office, I promised my people that no foreign hand would dictate our path again. This letter was their test to see if I meant it. Soon after, intermediaries began to appear, well-dressed advisors, familiar faces from neighboring countries, even a few African officials who called themselves friends. They came with smiles, flattery, and calculations. They painted beautiful pictures of progress, new hospitals, upgraded military equipment, infrastructure beyond imagination. But at the end of every conversation came the same quiet request: tone down your words, stop criticizing Israel, be practical. That was when I realized this wasn't an isolated message. It was a coordinated effort, a network built to make me bend. They had studied me, profiled me, and decided that I would eventually choose comfort over conviction. They calculated wrong. The next morning, I called my communication director and ordered a press conference. The entire cabinet was silent when I announced my plan. I could feel the unease in the room. "Are you sure?" someone asked. "This could cause international backlash." I nodded. "Good," I said. "Let the world see who we are." That afternoon, I stood before the cameras, the letter in my hand, the nation watching. My heart was steady. I began to read word for word the contents of that diplomatic letter. Every promise, every bribe, every desperate request to silence me. I could see shock on the journalists' faces. By the time I finished, the room was frozen. Then I looked directly into the camera and said, "They believe our dignity has a price tag. They think African leaders are for sale. Today, we prove them wrong." By nightfall, the news was everywhere. The story spread like fire across Africa. In Tel Aviv, panic erupted. Their private deal was now a continental scandal. Within hours, Africa Not for Sale was trending in more than a dozen countries. But this wasn't just a social media wave, it was an awakening. Mali began reviewing its contracts with Israel. Niger recalled its ambassador. Chad suspended talks. Ghana's president expressed support. South Africa called our action a masterclass in dignified leadership. Across the continent, something shifted. But the most powerful response didn't come from politicians, it came from the youth. Students across universities in Senegal, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa began organizing. They called themselves the Uncompromised Generation. They painted murals, marched in the streets, and demanded transparency in every foreign deal. Artists wrote songs declaring that Africa's dignity is not for sale. The movement grew faster than anyone expected. For the first time in decades, young Africans from Cairo to Cape Town were united under one cry: Africa will no longer be bought. International capitals reacted with confusion and fear. In Paris, diplomats scrambled to understand what this meant for their own interests. In Washington, officials called quietly, trying to gauge whether this was a one-time act or the beginning of something larger. In Beijing, silence. They understood that the world was changing. The old methods, debt, aid, intimidation, were losing their grip. Because the new Africa is awake. We are educated, connected, and unafraid. When one of us stands, all of us rise. You cannot buy our silence anymore. The backlash was immediate. Aid shipments were delayed, banking channels tightened, trade negotiations stalled. My security advisors warned me that foreign intelligence agencies were suddenly interested in Burkina Faso, but I wasn't afraid. Something beautiful began to happen. Africa started helping Africa. Nigeria offered trade deals to fill the gap. Ghana opened banking alternatives. South Africa strengthened our diplomatic channels. We discovered that solidarity was stronger than dependency. 3 days after the press conference, I visited Bobo Dioulasso to address a gathering of students. The auditorium was overflowing. I looked out at thousands of young faces filled with energy and conviction. I had no prepared speech. I spoke from the heart. I told them how for decades we were told to stay quiet, to accept what was given, to protect foreign interests while our people suffered. But now the tables had turned. Now they come to us because they fear what happens when Africa wakes up. I asked them a simple question. Do we go back to silence, or do we speak louder? The roar that followed was deafening. 5,000 young people rose to their feet chanting, Africa, Africa, Africa. That sound still echoes in my mind. It was the sound of a generation breaking its chains. But I knew inspiration was not enough. They needed direction. So I gave it to them. I said, we audit every foreign contract. We demand transparency in every deal. We build African economic networks. We trade with each other first, the world second. We stop exporting raw materials and start manufacturing. We stop begging for development and start building it ourselves. We create African development banks, African universities, African technology hubs, African pharmaceutical industries. Every sentence was met with thunderous applause. The youth understood that real freedom is not only political, it's economic. Since that day, everything has begun to change. Governments now think twice before signing secret deals. Every foreign offer faces public scrutiny. Every bribe risks exposure. The game of manipulation is collapsing because Africans are watching. Some of my ministers worried. What if they cut us off, they asked. What if we lose aid? I told them, any aid that demands our silence isn't aid, it's control. Any partnership that requires submission isn't partnership, it's colonization in disguise. Within a week, 5 African presidents called me personally, not through diplomats, but directly. How did you do it? They asked. I told them the truth. It begins with courage. We've been conditioned to be grateful for exploitation, to smile while our wealth is stolen, to whisper while others shout. The real revolution is psychological. We must unlearn fear. Western media tried to twist the story. Headlines read, Traore risks isolation. Burkina Faso escalating tensions. They didn't understand that we were not isolating ourselves, we were connecting to each other. We were reclaiming our voice. Even the business community began to change. Stocks dipped at first, but when they saw that transparency reduced corruption, stability returned. Companies realized that honest partnership is more sustainable than exploitation. Those who respected fair wages and invested locally were welcomed. Those who didn't began to pack up. We were not rejecting business, we were rejecting theft disguised as investment. Israel thought it was negotiating with one man. In truth, it awakened an entire continent. Their letter was meant to buy silence. Instead, it ignited unity. Across Africa, trade unions are demanding fair contracts, civil society groups are publishing transparency reports, and regional organizations are rewriting partnership policies. Corruption is now harder to hide because the people are watching. I think back to that letter sometimes, the paper, the seal, the arrogance behind every word. They believed that wealth could buy integrity. But they underestimated something stronger than money, the will of a free people. My response was simple. We will not be bought, we will not be used, we will not be silent. This is not about being anti-anyone. It's about being pro-Africa, pro-dignity, pro-freedom. Today, when foreign envoys visit my office, the message is clear. Respect our sovereignty or do not come. Engage in fair trade or find another continent to exploit. If you wish to do business here, understand that you deal with equals, not subjects. Because Africa is not for sale. Our leaders are not for purchase. Our children are not for manipulation. Something has shifted forever. Across the continent, young Africans are building technology companies, launching manufacturing plants, creating art that celebrates identity. They are no longer waiting for permission or foreign investment. They are building their own destiny. The transformation is generational, irreversible. They wanted to buy one president to protect their empire, but instead, they awakened 1.4 billion Africans to defend their dignity. That was their greatest mistake and our greatest victory. The revolution continues not with guns, but with truth. Not with violence, but with unity. Not with slogans, but with work. I see a new Africa rising confident, independent, and self-sufficient. I see young leaders who no longer ask to be seen, but demand to be respected. I see a continent that will no longer kneel to anyone. This is the dawn of a new chapter. The old world is ending, and the new Africa is being born before our eyes. This is Ibrahim Traoré. This is our time. Africa is rising, and we are just getting started.